Well, I guess with the Siebert Foundation again, and with many of you again, I'm beginning to recognize names. Several of you have reached out to me outside of these meetings, and I really appreciate that and the opportunity to engage more deeply with what's going on in your ministry. So today's topic is to talk about, kind of how do we restore our organizations to health financially after or as this pandemic continues in some ways. On the call today, there's church leaders, there's school leaders, camp, outdoor ministry folks, social service agency folks, other small nonprofits. So we have quite a gamut of audience today. But I think what I share kind of spans different audiences. And so that's the way in which I intend to present it. Certainly the way in which you interpret it to your context will be different. I do have some slides, and Michelle will be able to make those available to you after. And I'm not going to actually start with the slides right now because I just realized that I'm still the host and I have to let people into the meeting. So I'm going to give them a couple more minutes of grace time for that. But don't worry, you'll be able to, follow along just fine. I will share again in the chat box. I've done this with each of the other meetings I've led. Some other resources that we have available at our website for folks who are interested. Our blog site is there, as well as a link to a book that I've written that I think all of which can help you navigate through these times. So that's there for you if you want. And we're updating our blog on a pretty regular basis at this point. So newest trends that we're seeing in churches and in some organizations. We are actually, and I'm going to talk a decent amount about special appeals today. I have a congregation that just launched a $90,000 special appeal this week. It's a congregation with about a $450,000 operating budget. So it's a pretty sizable special gift appeal for a congregation of that size. Did it because the air conditioning unit, this is a church in South Carolina near the beach. It gets hot in the summer. The air conditioner went out and the roof is leaking. And so even though they're not in their facility right now, their facility had issues. And so instead of having it when people got back to the facility, it being uncomfortable, they went ahead and launched this campaign. Not until the council members all indicated that they would be at 100% support level, and a $10,000 gift, which was the largest gift we determined we needed in this campaign, was solicited one-on-one and received. And so knowing that the leadership is in, knowing that the largest gift is in, gave the confidence to go ahead and launch the appeal now. I have full confidence they will reach their goal here for that. So we are seeing that, and certainly smaller appeals for our neighbors, for our people in need, those have been happening through this and continue to happen. Institutions, several camps that I'm aware of, their annual fund operations are doing very well right now. People are very concerned with organizations and are doing what they can to be supportive in these days. So annual funds tend to be doing fairly well institutionally, yet some of these same organizations have no guest revenue. And in some of these organizations, guest revenue is 90% of their budgets, while gifts from individuals is 10% of their budget. So even though annual fund revenue is up, overall revenue is down. And so particularly in some outdoor ministries and some of our social service agencies, likely to build a deficit throughout the year. And so the question becomes then, what do we do to make sure that deficit doesn't cripple the ministry long term? So that's what I'm going to be getting into momentarily. But the other key thing that we've begun to see is a number of organizations really starting to take strategic planning very seriously. And this is congregationally as well as institutionally. That people are recognizing in the midst of this that God is calling them to new ministry levels. And it's calling into question that our mission, our vision is critically important as we move ahead. So we've been doing, as a firm, a lot more conversation recently about strategic planning, making sure that we have the identity piece in place, and then making sure that we're then, because of our identity, putting into place the goals, objectives, tactics to reach those. In some cases, not making final decisions yet, but putting into practice that, for instance, congregations, virtual worship is likely here to stay, but what's the goal of it after we're worshiping together again? I think the goal in August of 2021 is going to be very different than the goal of virtual worship today. And so we've got a lot of folks now starting to move into some strategic planning to discern what is that next step, what's God calling us to next. So that's just a quick snippet of what we see starting to take place. I am going to go ahead and share my screen now. It's 10 minutes after, and that's what I used to give college professors. And so I'm going to move on and not monitor the waiting room anymore. So I like to bring us back to this slide every time we gather. Each of the last 5 recessions, Protestants have increased the percentage of income that they give. It's Giving Tuesday. People are giving a lot away right now, and in many cases, increasing their giving percentage. We're still in that initial positive response time when there's a surge in giving because we see our neighbor in need. That bears out in what I just shared with you of annual funds doing really well. Congregations are still seeing very solid revenue responses. Typical recession, there'll be a decline. More for nonprofit institutions than for churches, but churches may experience some of that. That can be mitigated by the better telling of generosity stories and outcome stories. Then later in the year, at least right now, we still expect it to be later in this year, we expect to see a surge in giving led by our major donors to help us reach new levels of service. And that's really going to be the focus of today's talk, is how do you prepare for the surge to make sure that you capitalize that and run with that to lead your ministry back to health. And then we settle into the new normal. But today's conversation is primarily about that surge time, but it takes preparation today to be ready for it, to capitalize on it. And this can be true in a congregation. Congregationally, that could be part of your fall stewardship drive this year, or it could be a special year-end push. And nonprofit institution, I think we need to prepare for it a little bit better, and I'm going to get into that here in just a moment. So we want to make sure that we lead out of decline. Some are predicting that the summer could be the hardest time for many nonprofits, where we haven't been in operation, we don't have operational revenues, where giving might start to get a little stale for some donors. So summer, early fall is a time that could be a lean time. And again, the way we keep that from being lean time is by telling stories now, keeping our focus on the generosity of folks to our organizations, focusing on the impact that we continue to have in these days so that people remember that we are relevant today, that our ministry does make a difference, that we are touching and impacting people's lives, and that yes, in fact, they do want us still to be around after this pandemic is over. So I think we need to use that time in the summer to prepare for the next phase. But I don't want to necessarily, everybody's going to be at a different stage, but we don't want to sound desperate. We want to make sure that we lean into this and maintain our ministry's strength before it's a message of, well, if you don't help us out now, we're going to be out of business. We don't want to be that desperate. Nobody wants to make the last gift to your organization. And so we want to continue to keep in front of people what our vision for the future is, the ways in which we're making an impact now. And so when we are in a stage where we've got to get some revenue back, let's do it before we're desperate, where we're still able to operate and have a viable ministry. So, so focus now on your vision. I'm thinking many of you are going to need a special appeal. Begin to recruit those leaders. You're not going to see a surge in giving because of really good direct mail activity. You're going to need to engage donors, not at the same level you might need in a capital campaign. But I don't think we need to be looking to people for 3-year commitments right now to restore ministries to health. We're looking for a special appeal, that extra gift, that help us get over the hump type of gift. But let's get volunteers engaged. It has been, over the last 5 years, professionally, I have seen it harder to recruit volunteers to fundraising and to organizations. I believe that's going to shift now. It also, over the last 5 years, was really hard to get people on the phone. It's actually pretty easy now. In fact, I actually enjoy phoning now. Some of you have heard me say that before. I hated phoning as a development officer for the camps that I worked for. But people are answering the phone now. I think people will step up and help you with your fundraising efforts. I've had an organization have 2 virtual introductions in the last week. What a virtual introduction means is they had a donor, a potential donor that they wanted to meet. They had never met before. Historically, we had to do that face-to-face. That's activity now that is happening through Zoom, virtual introductions, and that donor is now, actually one of those donors made a $25,000 gift to this organization this week. And so we can do it differently, but we can't do it ourselves. We've got to engage our volunteers. And actually for all of us, that list of volunteers begins with our board, and then, or our council, and then it gets to other people who have the capacity and the abilities to be a fundraising volunteer. And prepare your case. The stronger your case for gifts, the more likely people are going to be to give to it. And so take time this summer to get that ready so that you know what you're asking for, you know what you're inviting people to give to, and then refine your lists. You know, one of the things that this pandemic has given us is a little bit of time to go through our data, make sure we have the right data. If you don't have somebody's phone number or email address, get in touch with one of their friends so that you get their phone number and email address. Work on your lists, have good data so that when you are ready to start asking more diligently, you're ready for it. So a few basics on special appeals. And again, that's what I think many of us are going to need. I don't think we need 1 or 2 donors. I think we're going to need a lot of our donors to step up. But special appeals, those that fail to reach their goal don't have enough donors. Don't get enough people to respond. You might get your first 3 gifts, but you don't get any other gifts, or you don't get enough other gifts. Many of them will fail because they don't ask for large enough gifts. If you need $100,000, you need at least a $10,000 gift to help you get there. Let's not try to raise $100,000, $20 at a time. We're not political campaigns. You know, I know Barack Obama, I think, set records for how much giving he got on social media from $20 gifts. Well, that's great, but he had like millions of donors. We're not going to be there. We're going to need larger gifts from some people, and then a lot of gifts from many people. And a lot of special gift appeals fail when all they do is talk about money. We need to be talking about impact. If there's not impact, people are going to stop giving, or they're going to give elsewhere, or they'll give you a little something while they support something else more significantly. So don't forget, building the case for gifts now, that was the previous slide, is critical, and it can keep us focused on sharing that impact. So we need to build confidence when we're in a special gift appeal. When we're in challenging times, donors need to know that we have a path forward, that's vision, and donors need to know that they're not going to be alone. And so let's just keep with that $10,000 example, or that $100,000 campaign example, that you need $100,000 to restore your organization to financial health here sometime this year. You'll need a $10,000 gift to get there. See if you can't get one person to offer that as a challenge gift. Let one of your major donors take that gift, but take it from a standpoint that they'll give $10,000 if 75 other people make a gift to the special appeal, so that they can give other people the confidence to know that they're in, but their gift can then also stimulate other people to give. NPR does challenge gifts all the time, and the reason they do it is because they work. So deploy that tactic, and it helps make sure that we keep that join us atmosphere present in our campaign. Then I don't usually talk a lot about silent phases of campaigns. I tend to leave that to university capital campaigns, but I probably would do a bit of a silent phase, whether I was in a congregation, whether I was in a nonprofit institution right now, high school, camp, social service agency, whatever it is. I'd make sure that I had the top 3 gifts secured before I really made this overly public, because we've got to build confidence. People, there's uncertainty in our world. And when there's uncertainty, we need to overcome that with confidence. And we do that by donors leading the way to that. And then if you have a team, if you have a steering team for this special appeal, make sure you get 100% of them to give and then announce those gifts. And then the board or the council need to give it 100%. And then you go ask the constituency. Every step of the way through that, that's in the order in which you should do it, builds up that confidence that when you get to the constituency, your donors are going to start to say, well, of course we're going to be successful. Look at how well we're doing already. Of course I would want to participate in that. And that's the feeling we need to generate and create in this appeal. And volunteers are key. Don't do this just as staff. I don't care if you're a church, a nonprofit institution, a big institution, or a small institution. These special appeals being led by, I mean, staff involved, sure, but led by volunteers, owned by volunteers, where volunteers wake up passionate about this and are inviting people to it. We don't want it to feel like it's a last gasp effort to save the organization, but volunteers will lead to larger gifts. In most of the multi-million-dollar campaigns that I've led, the lead donor, I'm talking gifts of $250,000 or more, were unknown to the organization when the campaign launched, but were discovered because volunteers led us to that new donor. If these are totally staff-run efforts, you are stuck only with the people the staff knows. Volunteers expand our network and lead us to other people that will want to be part of our missions and make that happen. And even churches today are seeing that people who aren't members of their missions are wanting to join in the financial giving to that organization, where we're getting gifts from the community. I was on a call with leaders in Florida yesterday, and a food pantry knew of 5 gifts from their community, or a church knew of 5 gifts from the community to the food pantry that were new gifts from people they had no idea who they were. Those gifts are happening because our story is able to be told better. And so let's get those volunteers out there so that we can network our way to new potential volunteers. That's the way you get new gifts. So we need to figure out how big of a campaign. I think you need to fill the gap, plus give yourself a little breathing room. I'm not here to proclaim that next January is going to just be all roses again and back to normal like you were before. Fill the gap and then get some money, not necessarily just for a rainy, it's not time to build rainy day funds, but so that you can invest in missions so that you can continue to move the ministry forward. So I don't think it's a problem to have a 10% or 20% goal beyond the gap of what you want to be able to accomplish. Just be certain that you tell people from the beginning that that's what you're going to be doing. And that's that vision piece. The next, what are you reaching towards? So if you're a church and you need to fill the gap and invest in technology equipment so that you can do a better job with virtual experiences, or fill the gap and help one of your ministry partners to thrive in what they're doing. It's okay to ask for more than you absolutely have to have. If you're a camp and you end up canceling the summer and your number is really, really big, maybe you're just trying to fill the gap, but still, I think anytime you point people to the future, they're more likely to be even more generous. My definition of a special gift appeal is it's less than your operating budget. If you're larger than that, you tend to be in a capital campaign and need a longer giving period. Giving period for a special campaign is really a year or less. You'll need to define for yourselves what giving period you're going to use. Most of you will probably be able to use gifts in by December 31st, 2020. And I think that will be a fine answer to what the giving period should be. So there's challenges. How do you solicit gifts virtually? My experience is starting to become, granted, we didn't do a lot of virtual solicitations prior to this pandemic. Our firm was very much, I came out of a model where you visited people face to face, and the best way to receive a gift was with a face-to-face visit. But we're soliciting virtually now, and donors are open to it. We are finding donors are happy to engage, but the visit has to look very similar to what a regular visit does. You connect with people, you ask people what excites them most about your ministry, you align your case with what their priorities are, what their passions are, and then you ask them for a gift, and then you follow up as you need to. So you can solicit virtually. I do think soliciting by Zoom is better than soliciting by phone, but phone isn't awful, and people are enjoying phone calls these days. I talked a little bit about new donor introductions virtually already. A lot of times in a special appeal, you'll try to gather together the steering team or a leadership group in some type of gathering. We would often do those as home gatherings. It's kind of hard to do that right now. Now, it could be that restrictions are eased and we can get back to that, and we can be back there in the fall. But it could be that we need to raise money when we're not allowed to gather like that. I have one client that still did, they did a virtual gathering. All of their people were local. And so what they did though, on the day of the gathering, they delivered a little basket to each person's home. They left it on the front steps, and the basket included wine and cheese. And they had a virtual wine and cheese party, but they had delivered wine and cheese to everybody ahead of time. Did I just freeze? Oh, I think I'm back. All right. So they had a virtual wine and cheese party. And so you can make a virtual meeting special. Remember, there is information overload out there. Make sure your message, your case is strong, that people are going to want to see it, that you haven't overloaded them with too many messages before, and make sure that you're inspiring. That's one thing. I'm a Lutheran. I'm going to blame Lutherans for this. We tend to not be as inspiring as we might be able to be. We focus on information. We need to focus on sharing the story of impact, what God is up to and all that we're about, and make sure that that's what gets people's attention, because that's what people want to be investing in. A gift chart will be critical to your efforts. This chart is for $1.1 million. I'm assuming the worst for some of your organizations here, I suppose. These may, depending on your organization, may or may not be one-year gifts. But if you need to raise $110,000, just drop a zero off of every number, okay? If you need to raise, you can drop 2 zeros off of every number if that's what you need to raise. And so build a chart based on what you expect people to do. In a special appeal, I don't usually ever expect everybody in my list to make a gift. Depending on how critical it is and how many volunteers you engage will increase the number of your current donors who you should be able to expect. Don't build your gift chart on people who may not make a gift. So don't assume 200% of your donors will give. That would be more than your current donor list. Figure out what you think is reasonable, build your chart on that. And then we do an exercise called winning it on paper. So if I need a gift of 150,000, I usually try to come up with 2 people in my list that might be able to achieve that $150,000 gift. I need to identify a prospect for every gift, or actually I need to probably identify a couple of prospects for every gift, and then go out and actually raise the money after I know kind of who is in what steps. And normally I start that effort with the top 10 gifts, and I usually like to have 20 prospects for those top 10 gifts. And I'm probably not going to get turned down by those who don't make the gift at the level I want. And so I've probably got 17 of my first 20 gifts by the time I finish that exercise. So use a gift chart. If for nothing else, it helps show donors what size gifts are needed. They may get overwhelmed if they hear 1.1 million, but they recognize they can do $25,000. You've got to give them the sense that their gift makes a difference, and a gift chart will do that. So I highly encourage you to do that. All right, I'm going to stop my screen share. We're about a half hour in, and see what kind of questions we have.
Hello, Mike. This is Cavell from Center for Urban Teaching in Milwaukee. I had a question about engaging volunteers.
Mhm.
You made a point earlier in the presentation about having your volunteers take point on a whole of your fundraising. So I'm wondering what tips and what strategies can we utilize as an organization to further engage our volunteers to participate in the giving process?
So there's certainly a couple of ways. You know, anytime you're engaged in conversation with them, we will often work with a form. I really creative here. I call it a major gift prospect nomination form. And you know, as you're talking to a volunteer, say, hey, who do you know that would really fall in love with our mission? Who do you know that you can share their name, their address, phone number, email address, maybe even introduce me to, that will just fall in love with our mission because it's so important? And believe it or not, volunteers will fill this out. It takes some nagging, just so you know. And I believe nagging is a gift of the Spirit. It failed to make the list, but I truly believe it is one of the gifts of the Spirit. So you're going to have to be tenacious to get this follow-up. Volunteers tend to follow up better, I've found, to other volunteers. So putting into place a structure, have a chair of this special appeal, and let them nag the volunteers to get these nomination forms back in. But that's the other thing to do, is then create some volunteer structure. And this, you know, you're going to do this differently based on your organization, but have somebody that'll chair the effort, that'll just say, I'm passionate about this organization and I'll chair this effort. Have somebody responsible for major gifts. Have somebody responsible for, you know, member gifts, or, you know, I don't know your organization well enough to know, you know, somebody that's in charge of gifts from volunteers. You know, I did a campaign for a cat shelter once. We had a chair for gifts from people who had adopted cats. I mean, so wherever you can define your different sections of your constituency, raise up a volunteer to be responsible for that, and then create a structure under each of those volunteers if you need to, so that they have support and they can go out and do it. But those are some of the easiest. Is that good?
That's very good. Thank you. Thank you for the suggestions.
Good question. And often we're not used to using volunteers. We're used to just the staff does it, and it's easy, I guess, but we raise less money that way. You may get people who say, I'm afraid to ask for money. Say, don't worry, you don't have to. All you got to do is help get me in front of the right people. You know, wind me up and I can ask, but my network's limited. I need you to help me get to that network. And so to be a volunteer in fundraising doesn't mean you have to ask for money. Sometimes you help tell a story. Sometimes you help introduce to somebody. And some fundraising volunteers are great at asking, and they're better than we staff people are, because it's a different level of passion. And the other place to get new names, anytime somebody makes a gift and you call them and you say, hey, thanks for your gift, who else do you know that might fall in love with this mission? I mean, because your donors don't want to be the only one, you know, and hopefully they're not going to be Wisconsin nice and say, oh, I don't know anybody. You know, hopefully they'll throw their neighbors under the bus and invite them to share in the joy of giving to you. But if a donor's giving to you, they feel joy in your organization. They feel purpose in your organization. And so they can actually invite somebody else out of opportunity to give differently. And another thing, they might even be able to host a virtual home gathering, you know, where it's not you hosting an event, but they host an event with their friends. And they then talk about your organization, and they invite then those folks to make a gift. And you can take it another level and have them each create a volunteer fundraising page. I don't love this idea. You're not going to get huge gifts from this typically. You'll get entry level gifts. You're going to get the $20 and the $15 gifts. but like a Give Lively kind of an app can help you do some virtual fundraising pages, personal pages. That might be something to do now. That's not your special gift appeal to raise $100,000 or whatever. That's, unless they walk in circles with just a lot of wealth, those are going to tend to be almost what I call go away gifts, which is, you've asked enough, now I'm going to give you 20 bucks, now go away, I gave, is what that is. So not my favorite, but it is out there. So good. Other questions? Oh, come on. It wasn't that thorough. And you all tuned in for some reason.
I'll ask a question.
Great.
I'll make myself visible and ask a question. So I'm an interim pastor at a congregation that that doesn't really have a vision.
Okay.
I'm not going to be there for a long time, but partly I think because they haven't really had a sense of direction. They haven't had a lot of giving. There's been very little talk about stewardship over the last probably 20 years. Any suggestions for asking when people are very connected to the congregation and want it to continue, but there isn't like right now a vision to lift up?
Mm-hmm. Is the vision to call a permanent pastor?
Yes.
So
that's in the works.
So I think I do think you can kind of lift that up. Often in interim, we actually find interim situations great times to introduce stewardship in a congregation. That Florida group I was talking about yesterday had 2 cases where they had interims, and both congregations are now in the best financial health of their histories. And I tend to say a little bit more behind the scenes, I think you'll attract a pastor that you want, the better you show them that the financial house is in order. Because I mean, there are pastors out there that love a challenge, but they don't always love a financial challenge, you know? And so if you can take the financial challenge piece and show that some growth can happen here, you're demonstrating that to your next pastor. And I think you'll attract a different level of pastor looking to move if that's the case you're in. And so that can be part of the vision out there. The vision is to get to a permanent pastor where you can get to a longer term vision. You can probably do a little bit to do some clarification on who the congregation is. That should be in the ministry site profile.
Yes.
Just make sure that it's actually true. I see Matt's a Synod office person, so I have to be a little careful, but sometimes I find that congregations lie on those. And I think it's great for the interim to challenge back and say, you know, you say your core value is service to the community, but I haven't seen you do any since I've been here, and it's not in your budget. Maybe that's not really who you are. And it's a good time to challenge some of that. And that actually comes out of my own personal history. My congregation lied on their ministry site profile, called a great pastor, and it was a terrible match. And that's really the first step of the strategic process, is making sure the identity is accurate. And so anything you can do with that can help lead them there. But I'd hold the carrot out in front of people that, don't you want a better pastor? Show them that you can do something on your own, and let's raise the giving quotient that's here to show that you're not dead yet and you want to go somewhere, and push back a little bit with that. What synod are you in?
Grand Canyon.
Oh, wow. Not one of the Wisconsin ones.
No.
My colleague, Evan Moylan, is doing a stewardship program with the Grand Canyon Synod this year.
Yeah.
They're just about to start. It's not too late.
Yeah, no, my husband's a coach for that. So
Okay.
I know about that. Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is really helpful. Thank you very much.
Good. All right. Thank you. Matt, I appreciate your comment up there. I knew you would concur with that sentiment. Other questions? If not questions, who thinks they're going to have a pretty big challenge here later this year that they're going to need to overcome? Mary Martha? And Mary Martha, I think you've got some ministry partners that can be part of that special appeal. Like, I think your special appeal is not just to your members, it's also that you need to find a congregation to help you at the $10,000 level. I mean,
Yes, we've really encouraged our members who live less than paycheck to paycheck to not stress about offerings. Um, Make your home offering plate. If you have $1, put it in. God honors your gift. All gifts are accepted. You know, what your best gift is simply what it is.
mhm,
And then we make that same invitation to others. Our partners have been beautiful, stepping up before we've asked.
mhm.
And when we need to ask for more help than we're receiving, we'll be feeling like we can be confident in doing that, and that God will lead the way in that direction. But for this time, it's largely, I appreciate these sessions, it's largely about making sure we're telling the story of what's happening with the gifts that are coming in, and letting our partners know how grateful we are in a time where they could be scared and say, well, let's give to Hephatha later. They're keeping their gifts flowing, and so we can keep things flowing out into the neighborhood and the community. And that can be a gift of $5,000, or it can be a box of 750 masks.
Yeah.
You know, but we're really getting the stories out there. We made a video to share with our partners also,
Mhm.
just to share some images of the faces and that word of gratitude for the walk in the gospel.
That's great, Mary Martha. And I'm happy when you get to the point of needing to launch that special appeal, give me a shout and
Thank
we'll
you.
go through.
Thank you very much.
And just a little secret for you and other institutional leaders on this call, many of our congregations are going to end up with a little pot of money at the end of the year because they got a PPP loan that they didn't necessarily need all of. I'm not saying, and there are congregations that needed all of that PPP loan. So I'm not trying to say some of you took money you didn't need, and none of you took money you didn't need. If you got a PPP loan, you got money that was offered to you to help sustain your mission to make a difference in the world. But I had to cut it a little bit short to get onto this call. I was on with a pastor. They got a $56,000 PPP loan. He anticipates they need about 20,000 of that to bridge the gap they're going to end up with by the end of the year, which means he's got about $35,000 worth of money that they need to invest in mission. And he believes ethically they need to invest that in mission. And so congregational partners, I think, are going to be there as long as scarcity mentality doesn't overtake them. So encourage my book, which should get them past the scarcity mentality, or is designed to anyway. But I truly believe that. Matt, you got your hand up?
Yeah, this is just a brief thing. We sent out a survey to our congregations that was carefully worded to say, like, where are you on the spectrum of we need assistance to we have assistance to offer our member, you know, and we've been really surprised at the number of congregations that are responding. We would have some resources to support other synod ministries.
Cool.
It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's great that you took the initiative to do that. And I think that's going to be the reality. It will be a spectrum, but there are going to be many that have some significant resource that the people want to have deployed to advance the kingdom of God. There will be a few people in every congregation that want bigger reserves, but the people that are giving the money want that money deployed to make a difference, because there's, in my lifetime, there has never been a greater need in our world to get money deployed to make a difference. And as nonprofit leaders, we can keep that message out there. And the way that we continue to remind people of that is to remind people of the impact we're making. So Mary Martha, those steps you're taking are exactly right on target for right now. So good. Anybody else expecting a big hole to fill? Anybody have like a really, really big hole to fill? I'd love to hear what the context is. Like outdoor, I'm an outdoor ministry guy, and I don't know how outdoor ministries don't have a huge hole to fill after this year. Who's got a hole to fill? Or who has a question? Come on, folks. This is a whole lot more entertaining if it's a dialogue. No? Nothing? Okay, who thinks they're going to do a special gift appeal by the end of the year? I see one hand. Is that it? Mary Martha had before. Carol does. Okay. All right. So Siebert will make these slides available too, that you can kind of look back at the things that I kind of had out there. So good. All right. Well, I don't need to just stare at you, but seriously, any questions? I allotted 16 more minutes for this. Was it helpful then? I mean, all right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Nothing? All right. Well, you've got 15 minutes back in your day then. So feel free to reach out to me with questions or anything that comes up. You can find me, go to my blog site. You can find my email easy enough there. I'm happy to dialogue. A couple of you did that after the last one. So I invite you to do that. And good to see you. Thanks for participating. And we'll
Thank you.
see you next time. Y'all take care.
Thank you.